Hello everyone, it's me again, Trev, for another episode of the WN Movie Talk podcast. What's the WN stand for, Trev? We Need. So it used to be We Need to Talk About Movies, but now it's WN. Anyway, this week I'm here to talk about 1989 Tim Burton directed superhero movie Batman, the game changer really. When superhero movies start to get serious, I say that, the Superman one already done that, hadn't it? It was over 10 years before Superman had come out. And yeah, this was really the next big superhero event film, and it was massive. I remember at the time when Batman came out, you couldn't escape it. What would I have been, 10 when Batman came out? Just turned 10 as well. I think it was released on my birthday week, but it was a 12 at the cinema. I remember the certificate had come in. They didn't want it to become a 15, so they created the 12 just for Batman. And also Gremlins 2 was another one that was an early 12. Now, the reason I'm talking about Batman is because this week I popped into a charity shop, and there, up upon the shelf, was the Bluray anthology, Batman Anthology. So the 4 films, Batman, Batman Returns, Batman Forever, and Batman and Robin. Now, well, Batman Forever, I must say, I did fairly enjoy it when it first came out. I think that was quite a hit as well, wasn't it? And they took it in a bit of a different direction. Batman and Robin, not really bothered about. I walked out of the cinema when that came on, actually. But Batman and Batman Returns, Tim Burton films. Now, I haven't seen them for years, but the box set in Blu-ray is worth getting just for the special features on Batman and Batman Returns. There's loads. If I just go through it, I've watched a few of the documentaires. I've watched the film as well, and I've watched it with the audio commentary as well. So I've really just absorbed Batman from start to finish, really. And then watched the films with my son. Me and my son have sat down to watch all 4. He's playing the Dark Knight games and that. And so he wanted to see the Batman films. Actually, his favourite was Batman Forever out of the others. And we got 20 minutes into Batman and Robin, he walked out. So there you go. It's a lasting legacy that film's got, isn't it? But anyway, yeah, not only has it got the director's commentary, Tim Burton, Legends of the Dark Knight, the history of Batman. It sort of looks back at the Batman saga over the years from the comic books into the films. And then there's Shadows of the Bat, the cinematic saga of the Dark Knight, parts 1 to 3. So there's 3 episodes on the first disc. And then as you go through the other discs, this series continues. It's really great. So I just love all that anyway. But it got me thinking, I've reviewed Batman before for an old YouTube channel that I had. And I must admit, when I watched it back then, I hadn't seen it for ages then. It used to be one of my favourite films when I was a kid. I was absolutely obsessed with Batman. We only had it on a pirate copy. I remember I couldn't get in the cinema, so we watched it for a pirate copy. And I think it didn't look right because it was such a filthy copy. And I sort of my imagination helped to create images, certain images. I don't know if that had any effect on my review that I'd done 10 years ago, but I suppose the Dark Knight, the Chris Nolan films had just come out as well, and I watched back the original Batman 1989, and yeah, I didn't give it a very glowing review. I'm going to share that old review with you here now, and then I'll come back after and review the review briefly, and then we'll get on with discussing Batman 1989 on my own. We've got no company again, so I hope you don't mind me doing these on my own. I hope you still enjoy them. Anyway, here we go. Here's my review of Batman from 10 or 12 years ago.
The film began. A family of tourists dressed for the 1940s trying to find their way around Gotham City. They stumble into a back alley where they are mugged. Their muggers then share out the loot and discuss the giant bat that has been rumoured to avenge criminals in the city. No sooner has the confident thief told the not-so-confident thief not to worry, there isn't any bat, they are attacked by none other than the Batman. The scene is hammy and corny and feels as though it takes place not on the roof of a building but in a studio somewhere. That being said, it is one of the most visually interesting scenes in the movie. The use of shadow and strange angles shrouding the bat in a mystery that in my mind is uncovered all too soon. Although it was a brilliant reworking with some amazing design, and although I can still remember all the dialogue, if I'm honest it bored me to death. Burton's direction was very discreet in his interpretation of the story of the Caped Crusader. Usually very visual and extrovert, his vision of this movie was reserved, although you can notice certain Burton motifs, like clowns and Gothic architecture. The bulk of the movie was cautiously handled. Now this straight reserved direction was a double-edged blade. On the one hand it secured Burton notoriety as an A-list director, and he in turn was granted the freedom to now make the kind of films that he desired, like Edward Scissorhands. The freedom he earned is felt a lot more in the sequel, Batman Returns, which has more Burton in it than this movie does. On the minus side, the movie lacks any real spirit. The plot between the action seems detached and slow-paced, and even the film's action sequences seem bland and almost free from adventure. If anything, the action sequences were more like an elaborate series of shots, and therefore also becomes unrealistic. Michael Keaton, who was Burton's choice for the Caped Crusader and not the studios, and I feel I have to agree with the studios on this one. He was static and wooden as Batman, and vague and confused as Bruce Wayne. Jack Nicholson is the show stealer here, as the maniacal, psychotic Joker. Now I know many would deem this sacrilege, but I don't feel that he's gone to any real effort to make the Joker his own. To me, he played it as Cesar Romero had in the old Adam West episodes, just slightly more sinister and not quite so camp. I also can't believe the Joker's story. His dropping into a vat of chemicals may have altered him physically, but then to acquire a whole new wardrobe and a manic comedy complex never really holds sway. They just as well have not bothered to create his story and just assumed that we already knew who the Joker was, because Jack Napier to the Joker was a transformation that never really tied up. We meet news reporter Alex Knox, who with his endless, idiotic remarks and jesting becomes the smart Alec. Then we meet the love interest, photographer and bat enthusiast Vicky Vale, who has been in some gruelling war zones but is strangely a girly girl, screaming, jumping, fainting at every turn. It's hard to imagine her photographing war. I love the design of the movie, the suit, the gadgets, the Batmobile, the Batwing, but I can't help but notice that it doesn't feel real when watching any of it on the screen. The models never convince me that they are anything other than models, and nor do the city scenes, like the opening scene. It all looks like a soundstage as opposed to location. One of the best things about the movie is the score. A major Burton collaborator, Danny Elfman, who by now has become one of the most sought-after composers of film and television scores, was in his infancy at this time. Here his score is haunting and thrilling, giving us a great sense of atmosphere whilst driving us along with the action. But again, like Burton's direction, it was restrained from his usual mystical qualities. One of the worst things about the movie was its soundtrack album by Prince, and the integration of his songs throughout the movie, killing the atmosphere and pointing out to us the failings of the summer blockbuster with its commercial trappings and product placements. Scenes almost become music videos, and by now have dated as much as Kim Basinger's costumes.
Okay, so that was my review, and now I'm going to review my review. There's something I've not done before, something you don't get a lot of. So yeah, I wasn't very impressed. Maybe it was the frame of mind I was in, because I've watched it again and now I'm comparing the two reviews. The 1940s style. You hear in the documentary, there's a chap called Michael Keaton, and he's like one of the executive producers of Batman. He's basically the person who got it all up and running. He got the movie rights secured in 1979, and it took him 10 years to finally see the film on the screen. Now, he wasn't a movie producer. He was a tutor at university. He was one of the first people to teach comic books in university, and he wanted the definitive Batman film, and I think he finally got what he was after with Tim Burton's style. So yeah, the 1940s style. Michael Keaton, he says that these films, as the years progress and Batman changes, he says each one reflects a different time in the history of the comics. So there's that. The way I saw it was they just was making it more cash-in, smash and grab towards the end. The last one, Batman and Robin, is just like a big commercial. The toy companies had a say in the production and the design of everything so that they could make toys to sell alongside it. So it was just money bent by then. But I also said that I'd found it boring. I was bored. Watching it this time, I must admit, I watched it with my son. He's playing the games, the Arkham Asylum and all that. So he was up for watching it, and we watched it together, and I enjoyed it a lot more this time round. Whether that's also because it's in Blu-ray, it was so crisp and clear. Just some great shots throughout. And I think, although I said that Burton's vision was hampered by studio involvement, it was to an extent, but there is some typical Burton styles and motifs and themes throughout the film. So I thought there's still enough Burton. But as I was talking about the studio involvement, Tim Burton, obviously, being a young man at the time, hadn't had a lot of clout behind him. But there was certain scenes that they sort of changed as the script went on. that you learn through the documentaries. Like the writer, Sam Hamm, he always is held responsible for letting Vicky Vale into the Batcave, and he said, I would never have written that. He didn't write that. So that got added through production. But one scene that wasn't in the original script, and they actually just built a set just to film the scene, was the scene in the Belfry at the end where Batman is climbing up the tower to confront the Joker. Now, this was inspired by a film Jack Nicholson had been and seen, and there was a big Belfry scene. He said, that's what we need. So then they wrote and added this scene at the end, which I didn't think was too bad a scene, to be honest. I don't know how else they would have ended it. I thought it was quite a good ending for the Joker and for Batman to be up the top of a tower, you know, an old gothic-y sort of Tim Burton style building. It is worth noting, though, that you can tell that this has been chopped around the end of this film. When the Joker says, you made me, and the Batman says, you made me, and he said, you killed my parents. And then the Joker says, I was younger when I killed your parents, or something like that. But in the final version, at no point does the Joker realise that he is Bruce Wayne. So this must have been divulged in some footage that now doesn't exist and, you know, found itself on the cutting room floor. I said Keaton was static and wooden and vague and confused. I bought into him a lot more this time as well. I don't know, I felt the sort of the torture behind him. In the documentary, they talk about why they chose him. Tim Burton really liked the eyes, and he says he's got piercing eyes that need to do all the work behind the mask. And they certainly do that. And yeah, I felt that his character was a lot stronger watching it this time. So it goes to show you, doesn't it, how your mind, it's all to do with frame of mind films. You might watch a film one day, you know, it used to be one of my favourite films, and then when I watched it again, I was hugely disappointed. And then this time I've watched it yet again, and I've really enjoyed it. I said about Nicholson being more like a sinister Cesar Romero. I still think that. He's still got the sort of the manic smoker's laugh, dancing around, what have you. I still don't think that there's a connection between Jack Napier and the Joker, the two sides, you know, how he becomes the Joker. You got to take it with a pinch of salt, I think, when you're watching it. What I did love about the Joker, though, is, I don't know if I loved it or not, but like his face is all deformed into that grimacing smile. And I find it really sickly when he's got his face covered in skin-coloured paint. But there's something in the HD that it looks kind of fake. That big grin looks like a plastic grin that he's wearing. It almost looks like something of the Grinch about it. You know, Ron Howard's version of the Grinch, where all the people have those weird plasticky mouths. Reminded me a bit of that. Elfman's score, still great. As I said in that one, though, there wasn't the sort of the playfulness so much. That really comes through in Batman Returns, when Tim Burton was allowed to make the film, the Batman film that he wanted. And Batman Returns, if you're a fan of early Tim Burton stuff, it's definitely a Tim Burton film as much as it is a Batman film, more so than Batman. You know, there's something in both Tim Burton's direction and Danny Elfman's musical score in Batman Returns. There's something more whimsical and mysterious about it. And it's, you know, from the opening scenes with the Cobblepots getting rid of the Penguin, you know, you can tell straight away, this is Tim Burton, this is Danny Elfman, this is their pairing. I said in the review as well that the Prince soundtrack was appalling. I still believe that. There's nothing that any of the Prince songs bring to the film. They all sound out of place. It's just another way of Warner Brothers making money, releasing an album from a contracted artist. The Party Man scene, the music seems kind of empty. It's, I don't know, the whole scene just seems a bit strange. When they're coming into the museum, Vicky Vale's got the gas mask in, they've gassed everyone else, and the Joker and his goons they're all running around dancing as they're coming in. They just look like grown men hamming it up. It's a bit of a strange scene. But yeah, that was my review of my review. Anyway, I will now continue to sort of analyse Batman in some more depth. So the opening of the film, it starts, title sequence, Danny Elfman's score. It's as iconic and memorable as the Adam West theme, you know. It became synonymous with Batman. It became the theme tune for the Batman the Animated Series, which was also great. But the opening credits is dark, it's cold, it's stony. You're going around what looks like caves. At first you think, is it the Bat Cave? And then it turns out it's a concrete bat symbol, the logo. Much darker than we've seen from the TV show of the past. And we're straight into Gotham City. Now, this It's filmed at Pinewood Studios. I said in my previous review that it looks fake. It does. In some places it looks fake. It doesn't look as fake as any of the other Batman films that follow. So out of the 4, this one, having just watched them all, looks the most realistic. But there's some great wide-angle shots and one of many impressive matte paintings. There's some great matte paintings throughout the film. I mean, now everything's done digitally, but back then, if you wanted to design a massive building or like, you know, your Axis chemical plants or have Gotham City sort of from a distance, you had to use matte paintings. And there's some really good matte paintings throughout this film. So the first shots of Gotham, it's dark, it's dingy, but it is so crammed. Everyone is on those streets. There are hundreds of extras they would have had to use in this sequence. The streets seem really compact with loads going on when you look down the street. The buildings, it all seems really compressed. You can hear the first utterance of a Prince song playing in the background from the soundtrack album, The Future. And that's a line that comes up through the film a lot. So that was obviously, you know, he's had the screenplay to work on, and they think about the future. Jack Nicholson asks that all the time. He asks it to Eckhart. He asks it to Bruce Wayne. So that's where this song, The Future, comes from. Anyway, it's playing in a beatbox in the background. That didn't seem so out of place. It takes more of a front seat, the music, that it begins to seem a bit sort of wedged and a bit tactless. And sort of takes you out of the film when it comes in. But we'll discuss that as we go. So we said Gotham City looks like the 1940s, 50s. Everyone's walking around in trilbies. But it's sort of like a meld between the modern day and the old. You know, there's in its vision. It doesn't look like the 50s, but it doesn't look like the 80s either. It's sort of somewhere in between. You're following that family around Gotham City. The little boy's got the map. The dad's like getting restless, they're going the wrong way, they're lost in this city. Now, if you're coming into this from, like, you know the comics, then maybe this scene is misleading because you're seeing these 2 parents with a child coming out of the theatre or out of the cinema. The first thoughts you're probably going to have is, oh, this is Bruce Wayne and his parents. This is the origin story. But it's a bit of a red herring because as we find out, we're going to explore the origin story in a quicker sense. We're not going to have to sit through 45 minutes of him becoming Batman. We're straight in with the action. So anyway, they're lost. They're weaving their way through the troubled streets of Gotham City. Now, the last thing they want to do is walk down that dingy, dark alley. Whatever made them think that was going to be a good idea. But they did, and they meet 2 unsavoury characters, two criminals, and I don't know, I never really noticed this in the past. So now I'm watching this in Blu-ray and I'm thinking, oh my God, they look disgusting. They look like they're on solvents. They got sore lips, sore bits around their nose, and the makeup is really impressive. Really, it really is disgusting. It's quite gross. One of these actors as well, I recognised him watching it this time straight away, and I was like, that's matey out of Auf Wiedersehen Pet. And he's the one who goes, what are you? And then Michael Keaton says, I'm Batman. But yeah, he's an actor called Christopher Fairbank, and he was one of the actors in the old Auf Wiedersehen Pet series. And he's the first of many British actors to sort of pop up in this film. There's another actor I noticed in it is the illustrator for the newspaper, for the Gotham Planet, or whatever the paper's called. And he gives Alexander Knox the photo of the Batman, and it's basically a bat in a suit. And if you look in the bottom corner, it's signed by Bob Kane. So I assume that this sketch of the Batman was actually done by Batman's creator, Bob Kane, for the film, unless it is just a nod to Bob Kane. Anyway, not talking about that. I'm talking about the actor who plays Bob, the artist. I recognised him straight away. I was like, that's Cassandra's dad out of Only Fools and Horses. And then later on, one of the Joker's goons, the bigger guy, not the big guy with the big moustache, the bald-headed bloke, but one like the fatter, tubbier bloke, is also the captain out of the original series of Red Dwarf. He actually comes back in the later series as well, don't they, where they're on the prison ship. Captain, what the hell was his name? Hollister? I think it's Hollister. But yeah, so the actor who plays him, he's an American actually. But I was thinking, why are there so many English actors in this? This is weird. But it's because it's filmed in Pinewood, isn't it? So it's all filmed over here. It's all the supporting roles, even though they're playing Americans, most of them are British. So anyway, yeah, you see a bird's eye view of the buildings, and you're looking down onto the streets, and you see Batman's silhouette from above with his shadow, and he moves his cape, and it looks animated, and it looks sort of whimsical, like a Tim Burton animation. It doesn't look quite like it belongs there. So then you got the two criminals anyway, they're sharing out the loot, and in the background you see Batman come down with his wings out. He sort of lands and then folds his wings up, and my son at this point, he's 11 years old, he went, cringe. So he didn't buy that bit, but it made me think, you see the Batman very early on in this film, it's straight into it. You do get the backstory, but you haven't got to go through this massive sort of plot line to get to it. You're straight in the action. There's Batman. You see him fully clothed in his suit. There's no surprise, no reveal. But I suppose there doesn't need to be, because the advertising for Batman, there was pictures of Batman and the Joker everywhere. There's no hiding the suit. So there was no need to sort of take your time to unveil him, I suppose. But yeah, my son saying that shot was cringe. I remember that being amazing when we first watched it, because all you'd seen at this point on the TV, any sort of Batman, was Adam West in that ridiculous sort of grey suit, just a man in tights. All of a sudden you've got this leather clad, dark, mean looking helmet. He's got the logo. I love the original Batman logo which he wears, the emblem, and it's got the tail with the two hooky bits either side, which you've never seen before or after. I really, really like that logo. It suited the suit. It made it different. Apparently it was to do with copyright. They couldn't get a copyright of the logo for a long time whilst they were filming. It wasn't until post-production or midway through filming. So at that stage, that's why the design of the bat symbol has the three prongs on the tail. And then Batman confronts these two criminals, scares the wits out of them, tells them to tell his friends about them. So the next sort of scenes, we meet in the mayor, Commissioner Gordon, played by Pat Hingle. Incidentally, only one of two actors who appears in all four films, the other one being Michael Gough as Alfred. The only ones who are consistent throughout these four films to tie them together as one sort of coherent Batman, I suppose. But we also meet Billy D. Williams, Lando Calrissian, as you will know from Empire Strikes Back, playing Harvey Dent, who, by Batman Forever, is played by Tommy Lee Jones when he becomes Harvey Two-Face, which I wonder what they had in mind originally with Harvey Dent. Why bring him into this early on? Was they originally going to do a Two-Face in the sequel before Tim Burton sort of had free reign of what to do and decided to go Penguin and Catwoman? I don't know, but he turns up in the third film and he's played by Tommy Lee Jones. It's completely different casting. I can't imagine Billy D. Williams playing something as manic as Tommy Lee Jones's Two-Face, but it would have been quite interesting if all these films had stayed in this style of the original. Things would have panned out a lot different, because I suppose that Two-Face may have been a bit darker, a bit more serious. By the time you get to Batman Forever, it's all getting a bit more cartoony again. It's not much different than the old 60s series, is it? But anyway, they're giving a press conference, which is going out on the news. They're trying to clean up Gotham City and destroy the gangs, which is where we meet, finally, Jack Napier, Jack Nicholson. He's lounging around with Jerry Hall, who her character Alicia is the partner of Jack Nicholson's boss, Cole Grissom, played by Jack Palance, who we hear mentioned a lot before we meet him. So they build up that character, the power of the character. So let's talk about Jack Nicholson for a minute as the Joker. And as Jack Napier, as I said, there's no sort of coherence between the two for me. It doesn't make a lot of sense. You'd have just as well started with the Joker already as a villain, maybe as a crime boss. But Jack Nicholson plays Jack Napier, very stern, very moody, brooding. He's quiet, he's thoughtful. I don't mean thoughtful as inconsiderate, but you can see he's always thinking things through. There's a lot going on behind the face and the mind there. But it just doesn't meld to the Joker. Whereas he's great casting, I'm not saying that. And at the time, I think they wanted Jack Nicholson from the outset to play the Joker. The studios, Tim Burton, everyone thought, yeah, he's got that manic side to him. Especially after seeing him sort of in The Shining, and he is just playing it crazy. They did offer it, I've read this somewhere, that they offered it to Robin Williams, and Robin Williams accepted it. He jumped at the chance, but they'd only offered it to Robin Williams in order to lure Jack Nicholson. So Robin Williams was a bit sort of put out by that. And when they came to make Batman Forever, they wanted the Riddler. They asked Robin Williams if he'd be in it, and he turned it down. So he wasn't going back there, being played for a fool. Another casting choice, which I thought was interesting, was another character in the film who almost wasn't played by Billy D. Williams, is Harvey Dent. The role had also been offered to Ray Liotta, who, I don't know if he turned it down or what, but he went on to play Henry Hill in Goodfellas. So thank God that happened, because what a great film Goodfellas is. Still to this day, a favourite of mine. But the Joker in this film, I say he's like Cesar Romero, and that's just in the way he sort of acts and jumps around. Clowns about, I suppose. But he is pure evil. There's nothing nice about him, he's killing people left, right and centre. He's using the chemicals to make sort of a chemical lottery with all the household sprays and detergents and makeup and stuff, which is really funny how that pans out, because you see them reporting it on the news, the death of these two models, and you see they've got the stretched out smiling faces. They've gone all white like the Joker has. And as they're reporting it, and then he interferes with the show, with the news report, and he comes in, it's his own little video that he's sort of put together advertising his new Joker killing Joker products, and it's quite sinister the way it's done. And you've got the two supermodels there, and he's superimposed talking mouths over their bodies. It's quite dark how that happens, but then it's funny as the news reports carry on later on. You see the reporters are dishevelled, and their hair's a mess. They're wearing no makeup. They look all scabby, just as scabby as the two criminals at the beginning scene. And it's I think that's hilarious, really. But it does go to show, the Joker he's really sick. He finds it hilarious that he's just torturing this town in such a way. And I mean, later on, he ends up gassing the city as well. He has the parade, and he's got those massive balloons, the hideous baby and the weird clown, completely Tim Burton designed images there. Alex Knox originally died in the script during the gassing of Gotham, but I think they found his character, the way that Robert Wall portrayed him, they found him so endearing that they thought they couldn't kill him off in the end. But then again, the Joker, he's that evil. He sprays Alicia's face. He scars her by spraying her with acid, and then later on he just kills her because he wants her out of the way so he can move on to Vicky. So he is just a really nasty guy. And then he kills his right-hand man, Bob, as well. And he told Bob, Bob, you're my number one guy. And he says it in this real strange way. And it wasn't until, I hadn't really picked up on this until this time, but that's what, he's taking the mickey out of Carl Grissom, isn't he? Because Grissom says that to Jack Napier as well, and he sends him off with his lucky deck. He's got his hands on his shoulders and he says, Jack, you're my number one guy. So that's all he's doing. But he really draws it out when he says it to Bob. And then later on in the film's sort of final act, he just kills Bob the Goon. Bob the Goon as well, he's a great character. He's real shifty looking, isn't he? And he doesn't really do a lot, and he looks really awkward in the scenes as well. I think he's a friend of Jack Nicholson's. I think I heard them say that in the director's commentary, and that's how he sort of got the role. But he is in other stuff. He does turn up in... he's in City Slickers, I think. But, yeah, the Joker, just proper nasty villain. Proper nasty piece of work. They're not afraid to go dark with this movie. But anyway, before he becomes the Joker, he's still Jack Napier. And as Jack Napier, you see him head-to-head with Eckhart, crooked cop. Now, Eckhart is played by the late actor William Hootkins. If you think you've never seen him in films before, you're probably wrong. He has had roles in quite a lot of films. Some not so great, like Flash Gordon, Superman 4, The Quest for Peace. But you would definitely have seen him as Major Eaton in Raiders of the Lost Ark, or more familiar as Porkins from the original Star Wars film. Now, everyone in this film just looks sort of worn and run down. If they're a bad guy, they look rough. They either look like a gangster, like Jack Nicholson, or if they're a goon or just a lowly cop, they look rough and worn. And Eckhart, he just looks tired, bored, scruffy, dirty. He's in this horrible sort of Mac. It's all unclean shaven. And this is also the first time we meet Alexander Knox, played by Robert Wohl, who is the bat-obsessed journalist who's trying to get this story into the papers. Everyone sort of ridicules him. Eckhart swans off, he's not giving him anything. And as he goes around the corner, then he meets up with Jack Nicholson. And Nicholson sort of gives him some money. He's trying to, tell him what to do. And Eckhart is like, I don't listen to you. I listen to Carl Grissom. So again, strengthening up the power, the character of Carl Grissom before we've even met him. But I was saying about at this point as well, we see Bob the Goon, Jack Nicholson's right-hand man, and he looks really untidy, unkempt. At this point, you see how protective he is when Eckhart raises a gun to Jack Nicholson. Bob the Goon straight in over the top, over Nicholson's shoulder with his gun. No one's getting to Jack Nicholson without going through Bob. I mean, that whole scene again, Gotham City, grimy, dirty. And when he meets him in that back alley, there's like smoke coming out of grates. There's rubbish piled up on the screen. Everything looks really dingy. It looks really well done. Now, we give credit to Tim Burton for the aesthetic of this film, but it's actually British production designer, Anton Furst, who he created this Gotham City. Everything that you're seeing on the screen was all down to him designing it. Some really good work. He won an Academy Award for his work on this. Previously, he'd worked on a number of films, 3 that I recognised from his list. High Spirits, which was the Daryl Hannah, Steve Guttenberg sort of spooky comedy from 1987. The Company of Wolves, which I know I've heard of it. I don't think I've ever seen it. There's not many werewolf films other than American Werewolf in London that I have watched, if I'm honest. But he also worked on Stanley Kubrick's Full Metal Jacket. Unfortunately, he passed away 2 years later in 1991. Well, he was with the actress Beverly D'Angelo from the National Lampoon Vacation films. He was quite heavily into drink and drugs, I believe. And after he split up with Beverly D'Angelo in 1991, and then he took his own life. So a real shame, a real sad story. Someone on top of his game, probably just about to sort of go even further. So that was 1991. That was only 2 years after the amazing success that he had with, and quite rightly, with his absolutely beautiful work, memorable work, and lasting work as well on Batman. So I say we've seen the iconic Bat costume. Bob Ringwood designed all the costumes for Batman. Before Batman, he had done work on Excalibur, which is that the John Boorman film? I've never seen it. It's in my collection of films I own that I haven't watched yet, so stay tuned. He done Dune, David Lynch's Dune, Steven Spielberg's Empire of the Sun, and Santa Claus the movie, directed by Janot Swark. And then since Batman, he's done Batman Returns, Batman Forever. I notice he's not credited for Batman and Robin. As I said, I think that was more designed in cooperation with the toy companies, which is pretty awful, isn't it, really? Just, they got what they deserved with that film, I think, don't you? But yeah, he's done Alien 3, Demolition Man, Steven Spielberg's Artificial Intelligence, and then the last film he's credited for, at least on Wikipedia, is Troy. So he's still alive, he's still around, but yeah, he just, that seems to have been, maybe early retirement, I don't know, but yeah, some good costumes in here. He's created a good look for Batman. Great looks throughout the film for the Joker in different costumes. I do really love the Joker's costume when he goes into the scene with Vicky Vale. He's got that beret on. He's always in like the purple suits, but the scene where he goes into the museum, that was always my favourite suit of the Joker's when I was younger. I don't know why. And then, to create the suits and the trilbies, that sort of 1940s look throughout. Some good costume design there. Well done, Bob. And then the other sort of wheel in the cog to give Batman the look that it had, as well as Anton Furst and obviously Tim Burton, was the director of photography, Roger Pratt. Now, another UK citizen. Obviously, it's filmed over in Pinewood. It's easier to use all British cast and crew. But Roger Pratt had sort of made his bones making films in Britain. A bit of all sorts, really. But he's done some sort of gritty dramas, such as Mona Lisa, the Bob Hoskins movie, and High Hopes, which was a Mike Leigh film. Then he'd done Brazil and Monty Python's The Meaning of Life. From his work on Batman, after his work on Batman, he's done quite a lot. He's done The Fisher King for Terry Gilliam. So again, he's an often collaborator with Terry Gilliam, Brazil, The Meaning of Life, The Fisher King. He worked on Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, starring Robert De Niro, Kenneth Branagh, and the Harry Potter 4 and 5 as well. So what Bob Ringwood and Anton Furst and Tim Burton were going for with this film is the aesthetic and the design, the style of the old Bob Kane, the original Bob Kane Batman era. Thematically, tonally, they was trying to encapsulate the comics, where the comics were by this time in the 80s. They'd got darker, they'd got deeper, they'd got grittier. The comics of Frank Miller and also the Killing Joke, which would later go on to inspire the Joker. And I think watching it now, I think they've managed to achieve all of that. So Robert Wall, so he plays Alexander Knox, and he's pretty much the comic relief in this movie. I know the Joker is a zany character, it's not really funny. Any comedy we get tends to be from Alexander Knox, his sort of obsession with the bat and everyone sort of taking the mickey out of him. He's always got some witty remark. He's got this sort of childish look in his eye, this childish gleam as well as he says his lines, and you can see he's being playful. And obviously when he meets Vicky Vale, he's trying it on, and even that comes across as sort of comical. I wouldn't say it's laugh out loud hilarious, but it's as close to comic relief as we get in this film. I can't think of any other films I've seen Robert Wall in, except for, I'm pretty sure he's in Good Morning Vietnam with Robin Williams, isn't he? Isn't he the other sort of his sidekick in that? But yeah, I thought he was good in this film. He's quite a decent character. He's a decent chap, just trying to get answers, isn't he? So there's 200-year celebrations of Gotham City. The mayor wants to go ahead with it. Get the banners up, get people out onto the streets. But Commissioner Gordon, he's not so sure. He thinks people will stay away because they're too scared because of what the streets have become. Again, they mention Grisham. Still at this point, we haven't met him. We meet Vicky Vale before we meet Grissom. So she sort of turns up in the Gotham Post. I can't remember what the newspaper's called, but she turns up there. She's interested in this Batman story. She wants to take photos to put alongside Alexander Knox's words. He thinks someone's sent her to sort of send him up, but she's keen on it. Vicky Vale, Kim Basinger, good. Basinger. I don't know how you say it. I say Basinger. She's good in this role as Vicky Vale. As I said, the character, she, faints and screams, and she's a bit of a girly girl, and she's supposed to be this war correspondent. As I said in my previous review, that doesn't quite stick as well. Is she tough or not? I don't know. Some things just don't sort of tie up, and that's one of them. Originally, she was going to be played by Sean Young, who missed out on the role in the very last minute. It was literally like weeks before shooting was about to commence. She fell off a horse. She damaged herself. She couldn't act. And that was that. She was no longer Vicky Vale. In interviews I've seen with her, she's, that is the moment her career took a turn. It could have gone up. It would have been, stratospheric. But alas, it wasn't to be. So she's, she admits that she went to some dark places after sort of missing out on that role, but didn't stop her coming back to try for the role of Catwoman in Batman Returns when she came in for her audition, fully dressed in a leather bondage suit, dressed as the Catwoman, crawling all over the desks, and still didn't get the role, Michelle Pfeiffer got that one. So she just missed out of Batman. She just wasn't supposed to be. But yeah, I don't know. I haven't seen enough of Sean Young acting to know if she would have been as good as Kim Basinger. She's just great in the role. There's a good chemistry between her and Bruce Wayne. She's sort of pretty. She's not sort of pretty. She's lovely, isn't she, Kim Basinger? But there is a strength to her. She's not a complete damsel in distress. It's a strange one as well. But yeah, she is good in the role. I will give her that. But finally, then we get to meet Carl Grissom. We start off with a very Burton-esque shot as the camera sort of flies up this skyscraper. It's a model of a skyscraper, and it doesn't do too much to hide that either. But it goes up this skyscraper and then stops at the penthouse. And this is where we finally meet Carl Grissom, Jack Palance, addressing his men. And also he's about to set up Jack's demise. You know, Jack says, we need to go to Access Chemicals, clean it all out, burn all the files. Jack Palance says, yes, you're going to do that, Jack. I'm going to send you to do that personally. So Jack knows something's fishy's going on. And as he does that, he's playing with his deck of cards. That's the only link between Jack Napier and the Joker, is he has a deck of cards in his hand. So he's playing with the cards, and Jack Palance has just said that, you go and do this personally. Then the door of Jack Palance's apartment opens up. In walks Jerry Hall, just in case we didn't get that link. And Jack Nicholson flicks a card up, spins it around, and alas, it's the Joker. So it's all making sense. It's all clicking into place. Jack Palance, I didn't know him from the older films. I didn't used to watch a lot of the older stuff. I knew him from City Slickers, which I think came out after this, and City Slickers 2. But he is great in this. He looks cold and heartless. And he has this sort of power about him. Definitely looks like he could, if anyone can control Jack Nicholson, it's him. You know, if anyone's got to be Jack Nicholson's boss, it's got to be Jack Palance. So we cut from Carl Grissom scene straight over to the benefit gig at Wayne Manor, where Vicky Vale walking around in that pretty, sort of almost like a wedding dress, isn't it? She bumps into Bruce Wayne and asks him, do you know who Bruce Wayne is? And he says, no, I'm not sure, and then follows her with this sort of puzzled look. The first time we meet Michael Keaton, he's got his back to us and he just turns around. There was a lot of people against the idea of using Michael Keaton in the Batman originally. They'd seen him in films like Beetlejuice, yeah, he's good in that, but Mr. Mum was more of a comedian, but there is something about him. Watching it this time round, you definitely notice that he's much more of a subdued sort of character. He's trying to keep it low key. You'd think he'd be a bit more famous in Gotham City, but I don't know. There's something underlying with him to make him want to turn into a bat and avenging the death of his parents, but to want to keep that up. I think in these films you don't have the explanation of how he gets all his gear. Obviously, I think in the comics and in the Christopher Nolan films, you have Lucius Fox, who's built all his gear. It makes sense. In these films, you get the idea it's only Alfred and Bruce Wayne that know this secret. And sort of, especially in the later Joel Schumacher films, they sort of talk about the suits being knocked together by Alfred. You know, these elaborate armoured suits with nipples in the later ones. And builds Robin a suit. Oh, I've thrown him something together. You know, are we supposed to believe that Alfred was the designer of these suits and the Batmobile and the Batcave and all this technology? It seems a bit far-fetched to believe such a thing. But they don't really establish that in this version. I think what I picked up on with Keaton in this version, he was very much a Tim Burton character. He's got the duality, the two sides, the Batman, the dark and the light. He's fighting with this ego, but he doesn't really know himself. It's like he hasn't got a sense of himself. He's a very lonely, reclusive man. He's not in the limelight like other versions of Bruce Wayne that we later know. He doesn't like to stand out as Bruce Wayne, the billionaire playboy, and he is obviously tortured. There's a lot of focus on that. It's around the time of his parents' memorial, so you see all that, and he's reflective of that. But also there is a sense of him, he's wanting to keep Vicky Vale at a distance. And I think this is where it becomes a bit strange, where Alfred lets her into the Batcave. And I mean, they mention it in Batman Returns as well, because by then it's been a bit of a sore point. People don't think she would have been allowed in the Batcave. He possibly wouldn't have let her in, not because he wants to keep his identity secret, to keep her safe, but he doesn't know himself who he is. So how can he ever let someone else in? So he's a bit more reluctant. But, he is a good character. He's a kind character. He gets a bit nuts, doesn't he? That scene with the Joker. He's like, you want to get nuts? Come on, let's get nuts. But he's a decent guy. He gives Alex Knox that grant on his way out. But he's not one who wants to stand up on a pedestal. So, anyway, we've met now Bruce Wayne and Alfred walking around this benefit gig. Again, Alex Knox trying to get information out of Commissioner Gordon. Now, Commissioner Gordon, this is where we get to see him a little bit better. We get to see him firsthand now. He's at the craps table. He's rolling the dice. He's getting his lady wife to kiss them for luck. And he gets a call over. A policeman's turned up. And he says, we got a tip off that Axis Chemicals is being cleaned out. And that Eckhart is in charge of that. So Eckhart is sort of under the payment of Carl Grissom, and Gordon is aware of this. They want to try and put an end to it all. This is what they're trying to do, stop the corruption within the police force so that they can take control of the streets. Commissioner Gordon in these films, Pat Hingle, is an honourable man. He's a kind man. The way he moves out with the policeman in the scene, he doesn't just walk off, he, embraces him and walks off. These are his boys, the police force, and he's got them under his wing, it suggests. This is where Alfred comes in and says, Gordon's left. Maybe you want to take this entrance? We don't get to see him use a slide in this version of the film. Not the bat pole. Yeah, much more sort of realistic in this first movie. So Alfred, of course, is Michael Gough. Classic British actor, stage and screen. Before we go to Axis Chemicals, first of all, we see Michael Keaton studying the footage in the Batcave. It's the first time we see the Batcave. It almost looks like coal that it's made out of. And it's just this wall of monitors. None of them are HD. Back then, it was all the tube box TVs, big old heavy things, built into the wall of this Batcave. And he's got this big editing system before him, and he can rewind and zoom and listen. And then we cut to Axis Chemicals, the shootout at Axis Chemicals, which I just think it is a fantastic scene. I remember that when I first watched Batman, I remember as kids going back. As I said, we watched it on a pirate copy, and you couldn't always tell what was happening in the shots. And it looked a lot more violent, especially the Axis Chemical plant scene where Batman shoots someone with a grappling hook and then leaves them hanging. Back in the day when we was watching it on a pirate VHS, me and my friends believed that Batman had shot the grappling hook through his face and he was hanging by his face. And now when I watch it, I'm like, how did we ever even think that? And also the bit where one of the goons is running along down the corridor and Batman whacks his arm up. We all thought that he stabbed him with all the spikes down his arm. But Batman isn't like that. He'd sooner have people arrested than killed. Eckhart's handing out the sheets of paper. Jack Napier, shoot to kill. The first shot of the Axis Chemicals, you've got all the police cars and that in the foreground, and then in the background, a glorious matte painting. We see Jack Nicholson, as Jack Napier, and Bob, who shifts listlessly on his feet as they pop the safe and it's empty. And then Jack Nicholson's aware that we've been ratted out here, boys. Be careful. So all hell is about to break loose, and it was always one of those amazing scenes as a child. It was iconic. It was just great. But the police who look pretty cool. They're all dressed in sort of their leather jackets. And then all the gangsters are dressed like gangsters. They all got the jewelry hats. And then we see Michael Keaton comes down in his black suit. And I love the look of it. Even now, looking at it, the helmet does seem a little bit too big, perhaps. But I don't know, it's just great. And this is where, for the first time now, Commissioner Gordon has seen Batman. And he's looking up at him as that guy is just hanging from the grappling hook. So Jack Napier's, you have to remember that with this film, Jack Nicholson took the top billing. It was his name at the front of the film. And it's almost his film throughout, to be honest. It's his evolution we see. It's his origin story. At this point, Batman is already Batman. We find out more about Batman as it's sort of, as the story goes on. We find out about the background and about his parents. But it's Jack Nicholson's character that we are following. Another thing that you do find out throughout the film is that Jack Napier, was the murderer of Batman's parents. That's another thing that Sam Hamm, the writer, holds his hands up and says, no, I had nothing to do with this. It all seems a bit too elaborate. The Joker didn't need to kill Batman's parents. So it's just another example of how the writing chopped and changed as this film went on. And I think it also coincided with there was a screenwriter's strike when they was producing this film. And when they come to do the rewrites, it was really people who shouldn't have been doing rewrites were doing the rewrites. As I said, there was studio intervention, but I'm pretty sure that it was Tim Burton's idea to have Bruce's parents be killed by Jack Napier and have that connection between the two characters. So Jack Nicholson and Batman, they first meet. And I mean, this was another shot in the pirate copy where the Joker gets hit through the face by a ricocheting bullet. And you couldn't really tell what was going on. And when he's hanging off of that thing and Batman's trying to save him, the blood on the pirate copy just looked disgusting. It looked like his face was torn up to us, you know, our little imaginations, 10-year-old imaginations, seeing more in this pirate copy than was actually there. So by this point, Jack Nicholson, he's killed Eckhart, he's knocked him out, he's got shot in the face, he's over the railing. Batman tries to save him, but he just can't. And then he falls into this vat of chemicals. And this is when he becomes... He has this permanent grin on his face. I don't understand the grin. You know, this is what I mean. It doesn't... None of this really makes sense to me. But he has the grin on his face. It's turned his skin white, perhaps. It'd probably just sort of melt. But it is great, the shot where Batman's trying to escape and there's shadows here and there. And then you see from a distance the smoke come up and then the wings come out and he just flies up. And Commissioner Gordon's like, right, we keep a lid on this until we find out more. Just a great scene, great end to a great scene. And again, yeah, we haven't needed to hide Batman at all. Straight in with it. And you never tire of seeing. You just want Batman in this film. You know, you want him throughout. The Bruce Wayne scenes are okay, but you just can't wait till he's Batman again, can you? Especially as like a 10-year-old child watching it. Now, we're running out of time here, so I've sort of been talking about the film in order and out of order at the same time. So I've covered a lot of what I need to cover. We've got up to basically the Joker has just become the Joker. We see the scene where he becomes the Joker. It's all filmed in this is a nice Tim Burton style shot with the mad doctor there with all his gnarly sort of rusty bloodstained tools. You've got the Joker's all wrapped up, but he's got his back to us, he's in silhouette, and as he's unravelling him and then he shows him the mirror, and that's when Jack Nicholson starts that manic laugh and he becomes the Joker. He smashes the mirror, smashes the light out and walks out, only to go and then kill Jack Palance. And Palance has probably only done like 2 days of filming here. Literally all his shots have been in that same location. But obviously we need to see Jack Nicholson moving towards us in the shadows. And the closer he gets to Jack Palance realises it's Jack Napier. And then the closer he gets, you can just start to make out the white face, the creepy smile. And then when he's right there, he steps into the light. Jack is dead, my friend. You can call me Joker. And then begins his sort of rampage across the city then. But his infatuation as well, he becomes really egotistical. He wants all the press, you know, and then the press keep on about the Batman. When, you know, at the beginning of the film, they didn't want to know anything about the Batman. Alex Knox was ridiculed, whereas now all we hear is the Batman is in the papers, and Jack Nicholson is like doing all these sort of tyrannical, maniacal, brutal attacks on the city to get his name in the paper. You know, he wants to see his face on the $1 bill. He's the biggest egotist you can think of. But Batman keeps getting the press. It's not fair on him. So I mean, there's loads of other scenes that sort of come between now and the end. We've talked roughly about the scene in the museum, the party man scene, where again he's got the makeup on. This is the thing as well, when he meets the gang bosses and he's got the skin coloured makeup over his white skin, and he uses the hand buzzer. You know, he's starting to do jokery things with the manacle hand buzzer, and he kills the bloke, fries him. Oh, it's getting hot in here. We're going to have hot time in the old town tonight. A line that actually pops up in the second Batman as well, Batman Returns, when Catwoman goes to fry Max Schreck, I think she says that, or it pops up somewhere anyway. But yeah, then he starts wiping the skin-coloured makeup off, and he's got the white makeup underneath. And then in the scene in the museum, Vicky Vale throws the water over his face, and it runs the makeup again, the skin-coloured makeup that he's got on to disguise his white face, starts streaking, and he looks awesome. That's what I said earlier. He looks great in that scene. He's got that purple beret and with the water streaking down, and that's a really sinister sort of look, and it's almost like the Heath Ledger look, isn't it? A bit later on, it doesn't look so tidy, it's not so pristine. It's a good look, and that's the first time that Batman meets the Joker as well. He rescues Vicky Vale, and then they go out in the Batmobile. So let's talk about the Batmobile and the Batwing. I mean, the Batmobile was a great design. It's still, to me, my favourite. I don't like the Christopher Nolan Batmobile at all. There's nothing batty about it, you know. It's like a tank sort of thing, isn't it? It doesn't do it for me. Whereas the Batmobile in this and the Batwing, you know, I had the toys of those. Absolutely loved them. The Batwing was brilliant. You had a trigger and a handle underneath, so you flew it. You held it like a gun and you could fly it, and then the trigger would shoot out bullets out of it. The scene with the Batwing, when you watch it now, especially in the HD on the Blu-ray, it just looks like a model, a toy being driven down like a model village, you know. There's nothing real about it, but it's decent enough, you know. It's like I say, it's a good design, and I do love the shot where the Batwing goes up in front of the moon, sort of makes a bit of a bat symbol before ducking back down again. But yeah, you know, you've all seen Batman. You know the story. You know the showdown at the end. The Joker throwing the money out, luring everyone out into the streets just so he can gas them, and then Batman coming along and stealing all the balloons. You got before they go and have their showdown in the church tower, which we've already discussed earlier on. Anyway, yeah, I think I've covered enough here in this episode. I hope you lot think I have as well. So yeah, if you've enjoyed this podcast, there's loads of others there. If you've only just found us, please do subscribe to the podcast, give us a follow, leave a comment, leave a rating on wherever you can. It's always appreciated. You know, this is done in my own time, just out of passion, really, for my enjoyment of films. I don't get any sort of money for it, so if you lot can help sort of generate some interest, that would be great. I've also started, as you may well know, I've got a YouTube channel now as well, where I revisit the podcast episodes. I edit them down into sort of smaller, shorter, bite-sized episodes, taking them from like an hour down to like 20 minutes and doing like pictorial podcast over there with images from the film. So please do look up WN Movie Talk Podcast over on YouTube as well. Subscribe to us on there. There's some really great videos and a lot more to come as well. So that's slowly creeping up. At this point of recording this, we've got about 150 subscribers, I think. So yeah, if we can get some more, that would be great. But anyway, Batman. So a film that I loved. Then I watched again 10 years later and I didn't like so much. And then I've just watched again another 10 years later and yeah, quite thoroughly enjoyed it again. You know me, I get a bit bored of all the superhero films. But yeah, Batman, definitely worth having on your list. And Batman Returns, I might even talk about Batman Returns at another point, because out of the two, I absolutely love Batman Returns. It's much more of a Tim Burton film, and well worth a look. Anyway, thank you all for listening, and I will see you all again as soon as possible. I know it used to be a weekly podcast, and now you're lucky if you get a podcast episode out of me once every 3 months. But like I say, I'm focusing at the moment on the YouTube channel, trying to get that up and running. But I will come back for another episode of this. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you all again soon. Chase! The family